Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest. Maybe just kicking this question to you. Do you think that because my church is in the suburbs, your church is in the center of the city, do you think that maybe that's also a little bit of a part of this conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, my drive here, which was like 50 minutes, right? So I move out of, so our church, for example, right? Our church is surrounded by abandoned buildings, windows kicked out, ACAB written on all the walls. Right across from us is like a sex shop and a male bathhouse, and it just looks like a bomb went off in our neighborhood. And for a lack of better words, I love the city, but the city is depressing. The city looks like the chief expressive individualism all day.
Yeah.
It's just angst, apathy, animosity. It's just brokenness. And then you walk into this building and you see people and you see older saints and younger saints, and it's creating a sense of like, there's people and there's love and there's affection and there is like connection and there's hope. And we celebrate the Lord's table every Sunday for that very reason. And the way we celebrate the Lord's table is we're singing loudly and we're coming, and it's very tactile, and they come up and they receive the elements, and you're grabbing hands with other members and you're putting your hands on their shoulders. And there is a sense in which we see the brokenness put on display like many other people don't see it. So when they come into that church and they see unity and wholeness and healing and hope and the hope of the gospel, it obviously has significant implications. So I can see that for sure. We don't need much, in our city.
Yeah.
You just need to see a bunch of other people who have joy.
Yeah.
When you're in the suburbs, things are manicured, and I mean, I don't know about this right here, because it looks largely different here than it does like 2 miles away.
This is a little less service, a little more crime, a little more poverty here, but I think it's different still.
And if you think about it this way too, like, who are the people around my church? Antifa, right? Kind of folks. What I need to create for them is that, hey, we're longing for the same thing.
Yeah.
What you want is a new heaven and a new earth, right? You want a utopia where there is justice and there is peace. We just going about it the differently.
Yeah.
I'm trying to show you that can be had here in this local community. Here you have all these different people from different cultures and different generational background, or different cultural backgrounds, generations, finding unity. Centering ourselves around justice and hope, right? You're looking at it by destroying the city and starting something new. Well, sin is never going to help you to build something new without it being corrupted. So that's part of our reason and rationale for making it open so they can see people. There is a sense in which the people group we're reaching is in many ways probably going to be a little different.
Yeah.
Church planting.
Yeah.
Even and as, because some of our audience will be active church planters, or even folks considering moving to the Northwest to try to start a church, and they might have something in their mind of, oh yeah, this is what a Portland contextual worship service looks like. And in fact, kind of confession time. So when I first got into church planting, it was in the very early, like, emerging church days, and so it was. Yeah, like, it was moving out of like the mega church boomer kind of religious services and goods idea, and it was like, hey, more sacred space. So we knew exactly what that meant. It meant you had to add candles, and yeah, you turn down the house lights, and you sing older songs, and so I'm just curious, as you guys think through like mission and even I'll say this, like, in my culture and where I did church planting in Hawaii, like the type of cultural music that was there was like reggae. It was reggae, or they called Hawaiian, with this kind of mix of Hawaiian reggae, and then there was kind of like Gray Havens has this feel a little bit where it's like folksy hip hop, kind of spoken word, where like some of the rhythm is in the vocals, and it's more of like this mainland dropout kind of hippie world. Hence my lava lamp over here.
Absolutely.
And so I knew, hey, I want to create a uniquely local cultural experience. And so we had a gifted worship leader, and I just said, hey, I want you to write songs. Let's just write songs for this context. And they would be biblically sound. They were, it was a high value for depth in the lyrics. And some of it was older hymn. Some of it, maybe we do a contemporary song or two, but it was also, let's try to be very, very hyper local. And it had a upstrum. It had a little bit of that reggae feel, a little bit of a warmer, tropical climate kind of feel. And so I'm just curious, like how much is culture, because you're bringing into like ministry philosophy, and absolutely lights on or off. Is worship an experience where you look around and sing to one another and you see the congregation and hear the congregation, or is it you only hear the singer and the spotlight? Like that's an aesthetic decision, but it's either you just haven't thought about it and you just do it because the other guy down the street does it. But when you think about it, you realize this communicates something different. The medium is the part of the message. Yeah. Right. So there are decisions.
Yeah.
But how much is culture? How much is like, how do you think through that? And how should a church planner think through that? And I think sometimes like the dude that comes from the Midwest and plants in Portland, he overdoes hipster culture. Like I walk into a room, I'm like, I know that guy's not from here because he's the most hipster guy in the room, right? Like he's trying too hard.
Yeah. Knows nothing about Portland, but
yeah. So I know that was a lot. That's kind of me just riffing on these things, but how do you process through culture, context, ministry philosophy, all that? Yeah.
Well, so to back up, you said that when you first started planting, you came in like with the emerging church.
That was going on. We had
candles,
candelabras. We had all that stuff, man.
So there is a sense in which what we can often do is put all of our emphasis on the peripheral things. Like what are the sights? What are the sounds? What are the, like all of that stuff. If the most compelling part of your community is the community, then that's going to look largely different in whatever context you might be. So it's going to look different in Hawaii. It's going to look different in the Philippines. It's going to look different in in Abu Dhabi. It's going to look different in New York. It's going to look different in Portland. It's going to look different in, what's a Bible Belt place? I don't know. It's something like that. Yeah. So if the most compelling part of it is the community, it doesn't matter how you express yourself. There's beauty in that. So long as there's meaningful membership and you guys are doing one anothering as the Bible calls us to do, you're stirring one another on to love and good works, and you're helping people to love Jesus better. Like, I don't care how you culturally express that. So you could be like, I'm originally from Los Angeles, and I was part of a church context that was largely influenced by Hispanic culture. And so you just saw the ethos of Hispanic culture play itself out in that church life. And then I was part of another church in Irvine, and that looked way white. And then before I moved to Portland, I was part of a congregation called Greater Union Baptist Church. It was like all Black elders in Compton. And that definitely had like its unique flair. So wherever you are, in all those regions, the most compelling part of that community was the community. And so in the same way that, folks used to focus on all the peripheral things, we could often do that with media. And neither one of those things are inherently bad, so long as the beauty of the congregation is the most compelling part. So it can have different forms so long as the element is intact, So yeah, I'm all down for like sending out folks to, even when you go to Seattle, it's largely different from Portland, you go to Olympia, and that looks way different from, Seattle. You can have different expressions, different cultural expressions, as we should, so long as that community is the chief part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I love what you just shared, and I think that the people, the place, the time, all play a factor. I mean, I could think if I was going to restart and let's say do something new in 10 miles from here, I think it would look totally different than what I'm doing right now. Because I'll be starting now and there, but I think so. Sometimes I look at all these decisions and go, well, it's really, for me, always comes down to three factors. It's what does God want? What's his heart? What are our strengths and what are the needs around us? And I think those things do change over time. Like God's heart doesn't change, but my strengths change, our makeup change. Like for instance, in our setting, we had a new worship leader step in, and he happens to be the leader of a cover band that's like very, very, very well known in Portland called Hit Machine. And so he's our worship leader. He's a Christian, and so it's big production. I mean, because that's his strength. I mean, he didn't necessarily come and change that, but because we were already pursuing sort of a model where it's like, let's create some continuity with what people are experiencing, that was a great fit, And so he is the big personality, and
is it his Hit Machine band that's playing?
No.
Or does he lead with some other?
He leads, and it's all volunteers from our church, and some of his connections have come and become part of our church and are now serving with the team, as volunteers. But it's the makeup of the church changes over time, right?
Yeah.
And so you almost have to pause and go like, well, what are our assets right now? And so what's the expression that God has brought us? I think that's a piece to that. So maybe that changes in 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, we could be meeting in a rented junior high building.
Yeah.
And we would have no technology and no ability to kind of curate that experience other than chairs and doing life together. And that's totally fine.
Yeah.
I full on agree. We deal with the hand we're dealt.
Yeah, exactly.
In God's providence, we have what we have, and we just make the most of it.
So maybe this is, we can kind of land the plane with this question, but I wondered, Thomas, how do you guard yourself and the church against the tendency to kind of, turn the cultural forms, because you're putting some ministry philosophy behind and even theology behind why you do things the way you do them. So I'm just imagining like the 1950s, maybe Baptist church in a small town or in like a gentrifying community that changes over time. And it's that whole joke about how many Baptists it take a change a light bulb, and you're like, what, change? And it's still pink carpet, and they have the 95-year-old woman on the organ or the piano, and it's just and they do things a certain way, and they might have even been cutting edge 80 years ago, but no one remembers that. They've kept their forms. And you would even, if you sat down with them, this goes back to some of the worship wars kind of stuff, you're like, hey, have you thought about putting some rhythm in the music? And like, well, that's satanic or something. And so they would even try to theologically argue for their forms of why they haven't changed. And I would argue, right, in that version of like an analog, anti kind of digital church, their culture and their forms have become an obstacle to reaching a younger generation and a seeker that walks in there. And even if they're saying, oh, it's transcendence, and it'd be like, no, it actually just feels foreign. So how do you seek to have transcendence, but guard against it just becoming foreign or becoming in another 30 years? Well, we've just always done it this way.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a sense in which I try to remain open with how our culture, so for example, stylistically, our worship. So I don't hold to a regulative principle that is so rigid that we only sing hymns, and that's because this is the way, this is what, there's an openness, so we can write songs, we can have beautiful composition. We can have a drummer, we can have a guitar player, a cello player, whatever the case may be. There's an openness, so long as the openness serves the purpose of why we gather. So if we gather to have one voice declaring one single praise to an audience of one, then everything must kind of be constrained to that. How that expresses itself, I'm open. So I do call to worship. I like a more liturgical approach because I think it serves that end. But to the degree that it no longer serves that end, I try as hard as I can to crush it. And I'm always asking myself and evaluating it. Is this beneficial? Is this fruitful? Is this just dated? Are we just doing this because it's been done for so long? So I'm open. Someone wants to come in and do a spoken word.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, would you do hip hop on a Sunday morning?
Of course. I have historically, most of the poetry pieces that I've written for Beautiful Eulogy, I wrote for my church and I recited them to my church, right?
With the beat?
So long as it served the right purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Like I would have no problem with a dude coming on the stage and having like an MPC, or for non-hip hop folks, it's like a drum machine, or having like a synthesized rhythm, so long as it's subdued enough to allow for the congregation to be the primary instrument, right? So long as it doesn't become a distraction for the people to focus their attention on praise and adoration to Jesus, then let's go. Like there's new technology. I mean, we have a Nord stage piano we just threw in there. We used to only have a piano. Now we have a Nord, which is like great. As long as it's subdued and it serves that purpose, so be it. I think if hip hop were like a medium that could be used to help stir the affections of our people, so be it. I want to be careful that, we don't do worship in a way that is homogenistic to either side. It's so white that the folks in our congregation that are non-white are like, this is bogus. But at the same time, I don't want to create, let's just swing the pendulum so that it's all hip hop to where like 80-year-olds in my congregation are like, I have no idea what you're saying, So I need to put earplugs in. So the thing is, you as a pastor, you have to think about the all of that. It's like you mentioned earlier, like your job is to like make sure that you're accommodating everybody's unique needs.
Yeah.
And helping everybody to have a single-minded devotion to Jesus. That is tricky, right? So we implement electric guitar. Like in some circles that I run in, if I have an electric guitar, I was just in a church last week, and I won't say the church I was in, but it was definitely on the East Coast, right? And no electric guitar. It
was like off limits.
Yes, it would be off limits. And I look at that and I'm in their space and I see the beauty in the reason why they're doing it. And I hear these voices and these like 4-part harmonies and I'm like, amen. I look at that, I'm like, that's a form, right? In my context, we're going to have a cello and we're going to have drums and we're going to have electric guitar. It's going to be subdued, but it is what it is, So it's just, it just plays out differently,
That's good stuff.
I really appreciate I'll say it again, your intentionality. I really respect and admire. And it does make me, and probably anyone who's listening, want to pause and go, am I being that intentional? Because if anybody wants to start a micro church, a house church, or a prevailing model church anywhere in the world, you got to be intentional. I think you might have to turn that up a couple notches if you're going to do that here in the Pacific Northwest. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, brother, for having me. I appreciate our conversation and the charity, which you're helping me navigate these things too. So,
Thomas, if people listening want to look you up, follow what you're doing, find out about the projects dropping, how would they do that?
So you can find my church, which is my greatest delight, trinityportland.com. And you're welcome to come and visit us to see how
In person.
In person.
But you do downloads, right? We can listen to the
So we
preaching?
put the sermons up online so that people can find some orientation about how we do what we're doing. Is it helpful? How do we preach? What are we passionate about? Those things. So you can check that out online. Although I would say that it definitely doesn't give you the full immersive experience. I think the greatest part of our church is the people and the way that they love each other well. If you're interested in what we have going on creatively outside of my church, you can visit humblebeast.com. And yeah, there's a whole lot of content there to dive through if you're a creative and you're thinking about engaging intentionally but creatively. That's a great place to start. Canvasconference.com. It's a conference that we do where it's the intersection of creativity and theology, where we seek to help creatives flourish in the church, but not find their identity in their creative work, but find their identity as a member of the church. So those would be 3 places you can go and get plugged in. So
Awesome. So also you can help support Multiply PDX in this podcast by liking, by subscribing, and thank you so much.
Thanks
Pastor
for having
Thomas.
me, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.